We are getting into the winter months of the year, although here in Southern California it doesn't get very cold. I like to tell people we have only two seasons here, summer and sort of summer. Although we did have frost warnings a few weeks back, which was unusual. Anyways, this is the time of year when I enjoy eating things like soup and stew and chili. And so what I want to make tomorrow, but I have to start the night before, I want to make some pork and bean chili. I did some research looking at different recipes, and I kind of cherry picked what I thought would be the best ingredients from all the recipes. The kind of beans I'm going to use are dry beans. That's why I have to soak them overnight. And they are these 15 bean blends, and you can see by how little is left in this container, I use them quite a bit. I want to cover some of the science because I find it fascinating on why soaking beans makes the skin soft if you soak them in salted water. Salt is sodium and chloride ions. And supposedly, and this comes from America's Test Kitchen, the sodium ions displace some of the magnesium and calcium ions in the skin. And because the sodium ions form a weaker bond than the mineral ions, it allows more water to get into the skin, and that makes the skins more tender. Works for me. I'm not a scientist, but I think it's fascinating. So let me start preparing my beans to soak overnight. I have here plenty of water, more than enough to cover the beans that I have. You want maybe 1.5 quarts, 2 quarts of water, a couple liters maybe of water. This is 1 tablespoon of salt, and I'm just going to get my fingers in there to stir that up to dissolve it. That looks pretty good, and I'm not feeling any salt settling on the bottom. Here are my beans. This is 1 pound, 454 grams of dry beans. You can use any variety if you want to use white northerns or pinto beans or whatever. This is that variety that I like. And there it is. I'm going to cover this and set this aside. This, by the way, is just room temperature water. Tomorrow, these beans will be ready to cook. Okay, so here we are, day 2. As you can tell by the smile on my face, I'm already getting excited about this because I love chili. In the meantime, what I have done is I drained and rinsed my beans. Some people use the soaking water. That always gives me the creeps because it's been sitting here at room temperature for 10, 12 hours. I don't know what bacteria might have built up in that water. Yes, boiling will kill the bacteria, but it's not going to kill or remove any toxins that might have been released into the water by the beans. If you insist on using your soak water, at least put the beans on the water in the refrigerator while they're soaking overnight so that they don't build up too much bacteria. Another reason why I drained and rinsed my beans is because I'm not going to use water. I'm going to use my homemade chicken stock for my soup. I have 4 cups here. I might add a cup or 2 more because I like my chili to be more on the soupy side. I like it to be a soup. So the first thing I need to do now is start doing my prep work. I need to chop an onion. Okay, as I always explain, I have my own way of chopping an onion, my own preferred way that I think is safer. Actually need to put that over there. Someone actually railed against me for not chopping an onion the way Gordon Ramsay does. Whatever. I mean, it was good for a laugh, his comment. I'm going to chop this whole onion. This is a medium onion, which is about 8 to 10 ounces, 226 to 284 grams. And I want a fairly decent dice. I don't need it too small. That should be good enough right there. After putting my long slices in, I can slice across. And there's my dice. Got the other half to do, and then my onions will be ready. Got a large cast iron, enameled cast iron Dutch oven heating on the stove. I'm going to put a couple of tablespoons of cooking olive oil in there. This pan in the back is my stock, melting. Go my onions. And I want to cook my onions for 5 to 6 minutes, just until they're tender and translucent. While my onions are sauteing, I'm going to prep my Roma tomatoes here. I have here about 2 pounds, which is about 900 grams. And I'm going to peel and seed these, but before I peel them, I'm going to cut an X into the bottom of each tomato. And in the meantime, I've got some water coming to a boil on the stove. And the reason why will be obvious in a moment. As you can see, my water now is coming to a boil. I've pierced a tomato with a fork. I'm going to hold this under the water for maybe 15-20 seconds. All I'm doing here is I'm just basically cooking the flesh right under that skin. And what I usually will start to see is some splitting of the skin. That's an indication that the skin is coming loose. That tomato is done. See the splitting there? And that'll be easy to peel once I have all my tomatoes done. So my tomatoes now are ready to peel. Look how easily that skin just comes right off. So I want to take that off. I want to cut my tomato in half. And then I want to just scrape the seeds out. You can squeeze the seeds out a lot of times. I just get a knife in there and scrape them out. You can leave the seeds in, I suppose, for this dish. If I were doing something like a delicately flavored soup, I might be more concerned about the seeds because they can add a bitterness. And then get that stem end out. Then I want to just kind of coarsely chop these. These are going to get cooked well in my chili. And I have the rest of my tomatoes to do, so this is going to probably take me a few minutes. Meanwhile, my onions are done. I'm ready to continue my next step with the cooking. I need a flour mixture to coat my meat when it's in the pan, so I have here 3 tablespoons of all-purpose flour. You can use 4 to 6 tablespoons of chili powder. I have 5 here right in the middle. You can use any heat of chili powder you like. I don't like the heat of chili powder, but I like the flavor. So I'm using a mild California chili powder. This is, again, 5 tablespoons. And then I have here 2 tablespoons of ground cumin. I like this in a lot of chili. If you don't want to use cumin and you want a smoky flavor, you could use a tablespoon or 2 of smoked paprika. I'm using cumin today rather than the paprika. Just want to mix this up. And this will be for my meat when I'm ready for it. My onions look nice here. I turned the heat down under it. I'm going to add some garlic to this, about 4 to 6 cloves of garlic, depending on how big your garlic cloves are. My garlic now has cooked for about a minute in there. I just turned my heat back up. I'm going to be adding here 3 pounds, which is about 1.4 kilograms of pork meat. This is pork shoulder that I bought at Costco. And I want to just cook this and turn this until it changes color. On the outside, I don't need to cook it all the way through, and I don't need to brown it. So you can see there that my meat has changed color now. It's not browned. A lot of juice there in the bottom, and that juice is deglazed my pan from the onion. I'm going to sprinkle my flour and spice mixture over the top. Stir that around to coat the meat. And then I'm going to stir in 1 tablespoon of leaf oregano. That's just the regular dried oregano that's available in the stores. My stock now is all melted. I'm going to add about 3/4 of this, which is about 3 cups of stock. Bring my heat up to high so I can bring this to a boil. My chili now has started to come up to a boil. I'm going to add all of my tomatoes. This is where this recipe really differs a lot from my Texas beef chili recipe. And then I have here 1 can. This is a 6-ounce, 170 gram can of tomato paste that I'm going to add and stir that in. And again, return this to a boil. My chili is just now starting to come to the boil. And you can see how thick that liquid is. I do have another cup of stock over here in the back. I'll be adding that after about an hour. But this is how I mentioned earlier that I like my chili to be more like a soup. So I probably will be adding another cup or 2 of stock to this. But right now I want to turn my heat down to low. Put a cover on that, and I'm going to simmer that for 1 hour. I want to show you a little trick here. It can help if you don't have a stove with a simmer burner. See how I stacked one grate on top of another? That will lift this pot a little higher above the flame and help to protect it from scorching. My chili now has been cooking for about an hour. I'm removing this lid carefully so that I don't fog my screen. And I should mention that I've been coming here every 10 minutes or so, giving this a stir to make sure that it won't stick along the bottom. Now I'm ready to add my beans. So there are all of the beans that I soaked overnight. And I'm going to add the last of my stock. And in the meantime, I think I'm going to melt another couple of cups of stock, just in case I decide that I want this more like a soup, but that's actually not bad right there. Okay, I'm going to raise my heat up to medium here and bring this back up to a boil. And once this comes to a boil, I'm going to reduce it back down to simmer, and I'm going to simmer this for 1.5 hours to 2 hours until I'm satisfied that the beans are nice and tender. Just in case I didn't mention it last night, you'll notice I didn't add any salt to this. From what I understand, it's not a good idea to cook beans in salted liquid because it makes the texture of the beans mealy. So I'm going to wait and salt this at the very end to adjust the flavor. I do want to grind some black pepper in there though. That should be fine. I'll stir that in, bring this back to the boil, cover it, and simmer it for 1.5 hours to 2 hours. So after 1.5 hours, I tasted this and I thought the beans weren't tender enough, so I went an additional hour. I do know this is going to need salt, so I'm going to put a good 1.5 pinches of salt in there. I did add 1 cup of chicken stock to this rather than 2 because I did want more soup. And then I have my infamous red-handled tasting spoon. For those of you new to my videos, the spoon goes into my mouth, not the pot. And let's see how this tastes. A little bit more salt. That's a big pot. All right. Now I'm ready to plate this. This bowl, for some reason, says chili to me. I always use this bowl for chili. Gonna put some of my chili in there. Oh gosh, this looks so good. A little bit of my broth. And one of my favorite ways of eating chili is with sour cream. And I have a disher here. It's kind of like an ice cream scoop. Put a nice scoop of sour cream in there, and that is ready to taste. I love chili, and I'm sure this is not going to disappoint me. See, that's just spicy enough. I don't like things too spicy hot. I'm gonna try one of my pieces of pork here. Melt in your mouth, tender. That is good. So excuse me, I'm gonna go enjoy an early dinner of pork and bean chili. For a printable PDF copy of this recipe with step-by-step photographs, visit my website, mobilehomegourmet.com, and look on the home page or in the recipe archive.